While most of our favorite summer festivals are one day or one weekend only, Ravinia's festival season is all summer long. Pick from over 100 great concerts between now and September, and I kinda need y'all help. For real, this ain't even an ad anymore. I need to know which show or shows I should go to. We got The Roots, or a Chicago Philharmonic tribute to Whitney Houston, or we got TLC and Shaggy. I can't decide, but what I do know is at some point, I'm out there with a loaded picnic bag and a nice blanket. But you can get yourself a pavilion seat if you like. Buy your tickets now only at ravinia.org. All right, for real though. Who should I pick? Today on CityCast Chicago, we're less than 2 weeks away from Chicago's largest Pride celebration, when nearly 1 million people make their way to the North Halsted neighborhood for the 53rd annual Pride Parade. So we've got everything you need to know before the parade kicks off, including why this year's parade is smaller, the best places to watch, and other Pride events taking place across the city. It's Monday, June 17th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I am joined by Jake Wittich, writer and newsletter editor for the Windy City Times. Thank you for joining us, Jake.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing well. Chicago's June Pride calendar has been packed all month long, and one of the biggest event for Pride Month is still coming up. But when we last talked to you in April, you broke the news about the Chicago Pride Parade downsizing. Can you remind us what happened, and can you kind of catch us up on what's happened in the last few weeks?
Yeah, so there's going to be three main changes to this year's Pride Parade. A few months ago, it came out that they were going to be downsizing the parade by about 40% by capping it at 125 entries. In addition to that, they are shifting the start time, so it's starting an hour earlier at 11 a.m. instead of noon. And then since we last talked, it came out that they're also shortening the route. They're removing 3 blocks from the start of the route in Uptown. So now it's going to start at Broadway and Sheridan in Lakeview. So those are the main changes. And then since then, there's been a lot of outcry from the LGBTQ plus community. A lot of people feel like this is not the time to be cutting back on Pride, especially when attacks against the community are on the rise. So amid all of that backlash, the city came to a compromise with the parade organizers after gathering some feedback from other groups as well. And they've added 25 more entries back into the parade. So now it's going to be capped at 150 groups instead of 125, but it's still about 25% smaller than last year.
So an earlier start time stays intact as well as a shorter route. Have you gotten any more clarity around these decisions? Why shorten the route?
I heard from people who were in the Pride Parade meetings that the reason for shortening the route is removing those 3 blocks will free up around 40 to 50 police officers that can then be staffed either later in the day. There tends to be some activity in the neighborhood in the hours after the Pride Parade, both immediately after and then late at night. Last year, there were some teen street takeovers. So freeing up those officers so they can be staffed later in the day or even at other parts of the city. There's a big Rolling Stones concert at Soldier Field that day. There's a few other big events happening throughout the city Pride Parade weekend.
So you talked about some of the pushback from organizers, community members. Since these compromises have been made, how have people responded to this?
Yeah, I think people are kind of at this point just accepting it. You know, if they were to add or change the route or anything, it's really not enough time to adjust. People who are in the parade got to fundraise for their floats or things like that. So I think it's just kind of this is where we're at. For the most part, the parade organizers have said that they are looking at this optimistically. They're taking it as a chance to kind of optimize the parade. They're cutting down on like corporations and things like that and really prioritizing LGBTQ plus groups. Politicians are being condensed in the parade as well. Mm-hmm. So the parade organizers, they've tried to stay optimistic and work with the city to make sure the celebration can be the best it can be. But then there's activists who still aren't happy. And I spoke with one activist, longtime activist, Robert Castillo, And he is on the mayor's LGBTQ plus advisory council, which has its own issues with these changes as well. But Robert Castillo has been making these pins. He hand paints them and then writes on them, "Leave Pride alone." So there's a contingent of queer activists that still aren't happy with the changes, but there's not much that can be done at this point.
Obviously, we had compromises with the city offering, more participants, but how have they responded to the criticism to how they've handled shortening the Pride Parade? I remember when we talked back in April, folks felt blindsided in many ways.
Yeah, people did feel blindsided. The parade organizers said they didn't get news of these cuts until mid-March, which only left them a few months to adjust. And then it came out that the mayor's LGBTQ plus advisory council also, they didn't know about these changes until it came out in the news. And same with members of the city council's LGBT caucus. We have 9 openly queer alder people right now, and none of them knew as well. So there's been this common thread of a lack of community engagement and a lack of transparency too. I've been trying to get answers from the mayor's office for like 2 months now, and I only just now finally got one of them on the phone. There's this feeling that LGBTQ plus community has been left out of decisions that directly affect them, and the mayor's office maybe hasn't been the most transparent about why these decisions are being made. However, when I did talk to the mayor's office, they recognized that they could have done a better job of engaging these kinds of groups and better explaining the changes. And I think that might have cleared up some of the outrage to begin with, because the lack of information just left for speculation, for people to feel like it's homophobic or nefarious that these changes are happening. So one thing the mayor's office said it's doing is they started fundraising. They're looking for grants to create a chief LGBTQ plus officer within the mayor's office, very similar to the chief homelessness officer that was hired very recently. And they're hoping to have that position by the fall. We'll see. They're fundraising for it. Maybe they'll find some and be able to do that by the fall.
I mean, given that it's being cut down by 25, right? The route, the time, how do you imagine that's going to impact spectators?
I think it's going to be the same amount of people. I mean, it's a huge celebration. It draws nearly 1 million people in recent years. One thing I will say about removing those 3 blocks at the start of the parade, a lot of people tend to view those as like the calmer parts of the parade route. When you get deeper into Boys Town, that's where it gets a little more rowdy, a little more of a party atmosphere. But I know a lot of like older couples or families that tend to be at the start of the parade, and then it ends and then they can go home. But so that's one thing. People are also concerned because the nearest CTA station to the new kickoff point of the parade is the Sheridan Red Line station, and that is not ADA accessible. It has no elevator. It has nothing like that. So people are a little worried about that as well.
I mean, what type of accommodations can be made, you think, in this time between then and now, or is that just going to fall on spectators having to make sort of transportation shifts?
I think it'll fall on spectators. I think one benefit, though, to removing those 3 blocks from the route is it's going to free up Irving Park Road, which is a major road, as well as Montrose, a few blocks north. So it's going to be easier for people to cross to the east side of the parade, which I don't know if you've been to the parade before, but it can be hard. A lot of people get stuck on the west side, and then it's hard to cross the parade route to get to the east side by the lake. So I think maybe by freeing up Montrose and Irving Park Road, it could be easier for people to get to other parts of the parade viewing areas. I think it's going to be a party, Yes, there is this cloud, I guess, above it that it's shorter than last year. I do want to say, though, it's citywide in terms of events that are being scaled back this year. I spoke with the organizers of the Bud Billiken Parade, who kind of face pressure from the city every year to scale back. But they told me this year they're earlier in the planning process. That's not until August. They're working with the city. They're very understanding. It really just comes down to logistics. This is a busy summer in Chicago. We have the DNC, we have NASCAR, we have a bunch of big events. And it's not just police officers that they're worried about staffing. It comes down to OEMC, it comes down to CTA, all the various city departments that staff this. There's human beings that run them, and they do need time off. They can't be working 18-hour days. So that's really what it comes down to, is it's more than just the Pride Parade.
The 53rd annual Chicago Pride Parade is on Sunday, June 30th, beginning at 11 a.m. from Sheridan and Broadway. Continue south along Broadway, then Halsted east along Belmont to Broadway, then south to Diversey. Jake, when you think back on not only your own memories, but the history, you covered the over 50-year history of the Pride Parade. Can you kind of give us a little 101, a breakdown of that history?
Yeah, so the very first Pride Parade, it wasn't a parade. It started with a rally and then a march, and it happened on June 27th, 1970, which was about 1 year since the Stonewall riots in New York City, which was an uprising among queer people against the police for raiding the Stonewall Inn, which was a now famous gay bar in New York City. So basically, a year after that, activists across the country were thinking of ways that they could commemorate 1 year since that pretty historic event that really a lot of people view as the catalyst for the modern gay rights movement. So in Chicago, they marched on a Saturday. And it actually is the first Pride March in the world, it's believed to be, because we beat LA by a few hours. Theirs happened a few hours after ours. And then New York, they did theirs on a Sunday. So we beat them by a day. So it's the first in the world, which is pretty cool. And at the time, they started with a rally in Bughouse Square Park, and it had about 150 people. They gave speeches, they carried pride flags that many people made on their own, shouted gay power, and then after the rally, they marched to what's now known as the Daley Center. The next year, they got a permit, so that's when it became a formal parade. And the tradition just continued from there. I spoke with Art Johnston and Jose Pepe Pena, owners of Sidetrack, and they're also the community grand marshals in this parade. And they were telling me, like, they remember it was just the bar crowds, because that's really the only place you could exist publicly as a queer person, in the dark, in a bar, where at night, and they were telling me, like, a few years into the parade, they remember seeing their first person in a suit walking with them. So that probably like a lawyer or something like that. And, over time, it became more accepted to be queer in the daylight. And things just boomed from there. Now we have nearly 1 million people showing up, and it all started with a group of 100 and 200.
How long have you been going to Chicago's Pride Parade, and what are some of your favorite memories, most memorable moments from your time attending?
Yeah, my very first Pride Parade, I was a junior in high school. I lived in Oswego. I was going to Oswego East High School at the time, and I took the Metra down to the city and went to the Pride Parade with some coworkers. It was a lot of fun. I had recently come out, so I was still still a little uncomfortable expressing myself in public like that. So I was a little timid that year, but then the next year I came back ready to party. I won't say how old I was, but I did go to my first gay club. It was a lot of fun. And just from there, I've gone to the parade every year. I've covered it for newspapers, that's always fun. Last year I was in the parade. So I've really experienced the parade from all angles, whether it's in the parade as someone covering it or just a spectator. And every year it's just a blast to me.
That means you probably have some of the best tips for people who are either going for their first time or who are going back with these changes. Where are some of the best places to view? How should people best prepare, best enjoy themselves?
Yeah. I would say definitely bring water. It can be a long day. It can be a hot day. Maybe an umbrella. It does tend to rain. We get very unlucky. It rains many years over the Pride Parade, but then the benefit is you get a rainbow. Mm-hmm. The parade can be long. Last year it was 4.5 hours. This year they're trying to contain it within 3 hours. If you're looking to party and be in the center of the action, I would watch it along Halsted, like near Halsted and Roscoe. That's pretty poppin' near Roscoe's, the 7-Eleven, places like that. And then towards the end of the route, there's like protesters, like anti-LGBTQ protesters. So if you encounter them, just ignore them is my best advice. It's not worth it. Just focus on your own celebration.
The Chicago Pride Fest, the two-day street festival, kicks off this Saturday, June 22nd in the North Halsted neighborhood. There are going to be plenty of performances from music artists to drag showcases. What are you most excited for during Pride Fest?
One, it's kind of silly, but JoJo Siwa, who's like a big meme, she is headlining Pride Fest this year. So I think I think she'll draw a huge crowd. Everyone's going to want to film her doing her iconic dance. So I think that'll be pretty entertaining. But in terms of Pride Fest, what I'm really excited for is the events around Pride Fest. Pride Fest itself is a lot of fun, and I will be there. I will be partying. But then after Pride Fest, there's parties. Like there's this pop-up party called Boots, where they pop up in random locations across the city, kind of unconventional locations. It's a little more underground, but this month they're going to be above ground at Metro. On June 22nd, there's definitely going to be a pipeline of people going from Pride Fest to Boots at Metro. You can just walk there. So like, that's great. So I'm really looking forward to those kinds of experiences around Pride Fest.
What are some other Pride festivities you want to put people on between now and the end of the month, or even bleeding into that first week of July?
Yeah. One of them is Super Sapphic. It's a collaboration among 4 lesbian-oriented party groups in Chicago. There's like around 20 plus queer women that are collaborating to organize this event. I went last year, and this year it's happening June 28th, again at Metro. So that's going to be a huge party, probably the biggest lesbian party this Pride Month in Chicago, which is really cool. So that'll be a really big one. Great DJs, great entertainment. Like I said, I went last year and I had a blast. I stayed up all night. Pride Southside is another exciting one. That is happening July 6th at the DuSable Museum. And then they've got events all around that. So that's another big fun one. It can be a little more of like a Black Pride celebration, which is really important. The North Side can be a little white-centric and male-centric sometimes. So I think being able to celebrate the diversity in our community on the South Side is so important.
I know 63rd Street Beach is having Black LGBTQ Beach Day on June 22nd from 12 to 7 p.m. That's another one of those events that's taking place on the South Side of the city.
There's just going to be parties everywhere. There's Pride North Chicago, which is another street festival that's happening on the far north side, June 28th through 30th. There's like the Lesbian Social Club. They're a new party group here in Chicago, and they're throwing a Pride Parade after party on the 30th. Backlot Bash is happening the weekend of the Pride Parade from the 28th through the 30th. So just parties everywhere. I don't know how I'm going to do it while working, but I'll figure it out.
Jake, how can people stay tapped into LGBTQ plus events even when June has ended?
Yeah, so I am the newsletter editor of Windy City Times, and we recently launched a queer events calendar called Chicago Social Butterflies. We launched it February 29th, so it's a few months old now, and it's honestly been a hit. And if you don't know like what you're going to do that weekend, subscribe to this newsletter. It comes out every Thursday, which is perfect timing to plan your weekend. And it lasts beyond Pride Month. It's year round.
We will drop links to Jake's articles with the Windy City Times, as well as a link to Chicago Social Butterflies in our show notes. Jake, thank you for joining us on CityCast Chicago.
Thank you for having me. Happy Pride.
Before we let you go, please head over to our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you'll find the latest headlines, some neighborhood guides, and you can subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Yes, we got some good news for you too. Chicago's 50 outdoor public pools are scheduled to open today. Check the show notes to find the closest pool near you. And, maybe give them a little call ahead just to double check. Also, Humboldt Park Beach, the city's only inland beach, reopens today for the first time in 4 years. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.